Hi there. So in Module 5, we're going to go through some of the default WordPress settings in the WordPress dashboard. So I'm going to start by logging into my hosting account, and you'll notice that the URL has changed now. That's because we updated the domain name with and replaced the temporary SiteGround domain name with the permanent one that we're going to use for the project. So I'm just going to log in real quick and go through some of the main settings. One of the things that you'll find happens sometimes is you'll forget your admin password. So how do you reset it? There are a couple of ways. One of the easiest ways in SiteGround is going to your dashboard, your hosting dashboard. And then if you click on the WordPress install and manage setting, you'll see your install right here. These three little buttons have some handy functions. One of them is update admin password. So you can click on that, update your password, and you'll be able to log in again into your dashboard. Just something that reminded me because I couldn't originally remember my password when I was going into log into the site after a couple of days. So in this module, I'm just going to take you quickly through the settings tab here in the WordPress admin dashboard. As I mentioned before, the settings on the left-hand side are going to be dependent on both your theme as well as the plugins that you have installed for your implementation. So you might start seeing some extra options. This particular install is fairly vanilla, so we don't have a theme installed yet. We have a default WordPress one, and we don't have a lot of plugins installed. Therefore, this is looking fairly simple. The only exception, of course, is the SiteGround Optimizer and the SiteGround Security, which I'll go through in a little bit more detail, but the rest of the settings are fairly standard. The settings section in the WordPress admin dashboard here might also look a little bit different. Certain plugins will add their options to the settings as well. So look for that if you're installing a plugin and you want to make some adjustments using that plugin and you don't see it here in the main menu, they might be hiding under settings or even tools sometimes. So settings is fairly straightforward. I'm not going to go through everything. There's a lot of different options here. Honestly, most of them I don't even touch for the most part, but there are some key ones that you might want to consider changing. Some of those are, for example, the site title and the tagline. So if you remember in one of the previous modules, I was having some issues with this site title and tagline here. I was in the customize screen trying to make changes to this. And I said, you can also make the setting changes in the settings screen in the admin dashboard. So that's here. That's the same. This is a global variable, site title and tagline. Some themes will allow you to show and hide these or show and hide them separately. So for example, I did this, which disabled both. I thought it would only disable the tagline, but either way, you'll see with the other themes as you're playing with them and working with them, they might have a little bit more options around what this looks like and how they're displayed. So typically what I do is I turn this off anyways, and then I create it in the theme itself. But since this is a vanilla theme, I just want to go back and show that that's the same setting. Some of the other things here that you can modify on some hosts, this is actually grayed out. I don't recommend changing the URLs here because that may impact the accessibility to your site. You'll remember that before it was there's a temporary URL here. After we modified it, it actually changed it in these fields as well, using the search and replace function that automatically gets executed when you do update a domain in SiteGround. One of the key things here is the admin address. So this is a email address that all of your notifications and messages will go to. So that's really key. If you want to change it, you can change it in here, but it won't become active until somebody confirms it, the owner of that new address. So this is handy if, for example, you're working on a website and you want to hand it off to a client and you want to put in their email address as the administrator. You can change it, save the settings, and then they can select, they can verify it and confirm the address, and then they become the owner of it or the administrator going forward. A few other things here that are useful is the membership. Anybody can register. So if you leave this unselected, people won't be able to register your site. Sometimes you want to enable that. For example, if you're using a WooCommerce site and you want people to be able to create their profiles, or you're working on a membership site where you want people to sign up to your website, you just you could turn this on, and then you can select a particular role that you want to assign that user. So as I mentioned before, there are a number of roles that are automatically created in WordPress. These can be modified as well. It's a very powerful way to manage access to the website. And so basically what this does is it says anybody can register and create a subscriber type account, which is the lowest level type of an account that a user can get on your website. So I won't go through that in a lot of detail right now, but just keep in mind that if you are doing some type of a membership type project, you'll need to turn that on, and I recommend setting it to subscriber. You can change the language, time zone, and date format. Yeah, so this is a useful screen here, and one you'll be interacting with often, the general option and settings. Writing just gives you a little bit more settings around, setting a default blog post category, for example, or enabling submitting and creating blog posts using email. So you can email a blog post to your blog and it'll automatically show up on your blog. It's kind of handy. I don't really use it that often. The reading tab is a little bit more useful. I would say it would just allow you to set the number of posts and items that will show up in your blog role. Again, this might get overwritten and managed by the theme itself, but it's useful to know where it is if you're using like a vanilla theme and you want to make some changes to it. The key thing here is search engine visibility. So if you remember, one of the main things is while you're working on a website, you want to set the indexing to off, and then to remember to set it to on as well after you want to launch the project, so it does show up on Google or any other search engines as well. So just remember to turn that off after you're done developing. Discussion is where you create, where you add, modify settings for comments that get created on your website. So you can disable comments or you can enable them. It's up to you. Here it gives you a little bit more control of how they're moderated, how you're notified if new comments are added, and so forth. You can also disallow certain keywords, for example, and set avatars and stuff like that. So it's useful, especially if you're planning on creating a blog that allows comments. It's useful to go through these and play around with these settings as well. Out of the box, it works great as well. What I would recommend is leaving the settings for moderating comments, because you might get a lot of spam, especially if you don't have a spam plugin that manages spam. You will get a lot of spam in your comment section. So I do urge you to leave the moderation option on so that you can review the comments and approve or deny them or send them to spam or trash if they're no good. Media is, I don't think I would say that I use this often either. So here you can set the dimensions for example, thumbnail size is useful if you're creating a web store like WooCommerce, so that when you have your, for example, product pages and libraries, you can set the images to show up in a certain size, like a thumbnail or medium or large. You can set the default sizes for those particular images here, and WordPress will automatically generate these thumbnails as well, depending on the or for the images that you do upload. So it's handy. You can also manage this in a theme as well, but it's useful to know where it is and how to modify them. Another useful option here is organize your uploads folder by month or year. You can disable that as well so that they all go into one folder, but by default it's turned on, and I think most people do leave it on as well in here. One of the more useful options here is going to be the permalink structure. The permalink structure is what your URL will look like for blog posts or products or whatever. So this will also change. The screen will look a little bit different once we install WooCommerce. It'll give you a little bit more options of how your products show up, for example. But for now, since we only have blogs and pages, the default option in SiteGround works great. The default WordPress option is actually plain, which is not useful at all. So it gives you this type of a URL, which shows the pages and posts by their ID. So it's not very SEO friendly. If you are using a different hosting environment, one of the main settings that I would say needs to be changed from the get-go is setting it to post name or something else. You can do a custom structure as well, where you can insert categories and post names. For example, I could set all of my posts to show up as my URL, and then the category name, and then the post name as well. So that's another option. This is totally fine as well, and better for SEO. So I do urge you to change that to this particular setting because it's the most useful one. So what that means is, for example, when we open up this blog post, you can see that the URL is actually WordPress resources at SiteGround instead of the default, which is P and whatever the particular ID is for this object. So it's useful to change it to this because, again, more SEO friendly this way and better overall user experience as well, so that users can remember your URLs if they want to, or versus remembering an ID of a page, right? So yeah, and you can set some more settings here in terms of categories and tag base. So if you want to, again, customize your structure a little bit, you can change that here. I usually don't change these. I usually go with post name or custom structure, which is like a category and then post name, for example, which is really useful. I don't recommend also using the year structure as well, just because in some cases you might have content that is doing really well from an SEO perspective and ranking, but it becomes stale. So for example, if you published it in 2019, this URL structure will always show that old date, the original date, and you won't be able to modify that. And so there's some debate in the SEO space whether or not that actually impacts the ranking. I've seen it impact the ranking, but some people are saying that it might not impact the ranking of those pages as much. I just think it's better to do it this way. Anyways, it's cleaner, easier to remember, so it's a better way to do it. The main thing about this setting is you want to set it early. You want to set it at the beginning, because if you change it after, which you certainly can, all of your URLs will have to be updated. You will need to do a sort of a redirection if your links are set up externally, or for example, if other sites are linking to your content. If you were using this structure before, for example, they're going to point to this type of URL, and what you want to do, instead of getting a 404, if somebody goes to your website and tries to hit this link, but you've changed the permalink settings, you'll have to redirect this page to this page, for example, right? So what you want to do here is you want to set this early and set it to the appropriate permalink settings so that you don't have to change it later and create a bunch of redirects. on your website. So this is an important area, and I would urge you to spend some time here. And again, if your hosting environment, if you're not using SiteGround and your hosting environment uses something like one of these four, or just switch it to either post name or custom structure, which is the most useful one. Privacy settings are really helpful if you're trying to create, for example, terms and conditions or privacy type privacy policy pages or whatever. You can create them and set them here as well, and they're kind of default for privacy policy pages in WordPress, which you can add in a lot of spots. And this is actually really helpful. For example, if you're doing a web store, e-commerce type site where you want to define, a certain privacy policy page, for example, around collecting data or whatever, and you're going to be able to set that page right in the settings in the WooCommerce settings, for example, so that your users can see it and navigate to it easily. So it's a useful option as well to explore. So those are the standard ones. Again, there's some really useful settings here that you should explore and learn. And they're not overly complicated, but they're definitely important in order to make your website work and function properly. So let's just recap real quick and make sure we didn't miss anything. So I showed how to update the admin email and the name of your website, really important. The administrator email is going to get all of the website notifications. So it's really helpful to know where that is and how to modify it and change it. Always change the default WordPress structure, like I mentioned. So instead of using that p whatever page ID, change it to the actual page name. And disable crawling of your website. So, discouraging search engines from crawling your website while you're working on it is good practice as well. And then of course, the key is remembering to turn that off once you want to go live. So those are the key topic 5 takeaways for the WordPress settings in the WordPress admin dashboard. Thank you.